welcome everybody. It's Rob again. It's time for another member talk, and today we are with a friend of mine by the name of Brian Curnow. Hey, Brian, how you doing today?
Good, Rob. How's everything over in Spokane?
Hot, very hot.
Yeah,
Midsummer just
yeah.
started here in August, and I think we're about 103 today. So
Oh,
I'm
wow.
inside wearing the in the air conditioning, enjoying it. How about
That's
where you're
good.
at?
Well, it's been warm over here. Today's a little bit overcast. It's going to hit 80, I think, but for us that's warm. So we
Yeah.
complain when it hits 77. So
Well, so now tell us, where are you exactly? Where's your facility located?
I'm at our facility in Sumner, Curnow Funeral Home. My office overlooks Main Street right in downtown Sumner, so I see everything that goes on, good, bad, or indifferent. But it is interesting for sure. So yeah, I'm here in Sumner, right in downtown.
Perfect. And you have a couple of locations, a couple satellites. Can you tell me about those a little bit?
Sure. So we have, for the Curnow brand, we have our arrangement office up in Bellevue, which most of that business up there is serving the members of People's Memorial. And then we have branch office out in Graham, about 20 minutes due south of us here, out in Graham, which is a growing part of the county.
Yeah.
And then we have a Hill Funeral Home over in Puyallup, right in downtown Puyallup, that we purchased 2.5 years ago. And they're right downtown, right on Pioneer there, and it's been there since 1908. Second
Yeah.
oldest in Puyallup, only behind the Washington State Fair. So we've got them north,
Yeah.
south, east, and west.
I'm glad you mentioned it. That is the home of the Washington State Fair, and if you've not been to it, that thing's huge. I think it's canceled probably this year, I suspect. But
It has been, yeah. It's the seventh largest state fair in the United States.
Amazing. It's huge. Absolutely huge. I know the one thing, the scones, you got to go get the raspberry scones. Those seem to be the hot topic there.
Well, and to add on to that now, every Tuesday throughout the year, they have a scone truck parked across the street from the fair. So you can go there Tuesdays and get your scones.
So if we need our scone fix, we need to come see you and then head down there.
You shoot me an email, call me, I'll go get them, I'll FedEx them to you.
Perfect.
With a small handling fee.
Yeah, exactly. So Brian, you and I have actually known each other for quite some time. We've kind of ran in the same circles, and our paths have crossed quite a number of times. But give me just some background. Share with us a little bit of background. How did you get involved in this type of profession, and bring us up to speed with where you're at today with your multiple locations and things?
Okay, well, to begin with, since I was a little kid, I wanted to be a mortician, so to speak. And I don't know why, it just always fascinated me, but I look back at my childhood, and my father was actually a shoe salesman, believe it or not. And he had a little store across the street from a dry mortuary in Parkland.
Okay.
And so going into his store, I'd look across the street and look at dry mortuary, and I'd see their black hearse parked outside, and it just fascinated me. I had no idea what happened there. All I knew that there was, dead people there, but it just fascinated me. So growing up, I wanted to be a mortician. So when it came time to choose my career path out of high school, I went to my guidance counselor. And of course, back then, I'm dating myself here, but we didn't have computers. And so to do research on how to be a funeral director and embalmer, my guidance counselor in high school said, "Brian, you've really put me to the task here, because I've never had a student want to be a mortician." So she and I myself, and we did some research and found out about Mount Hood Community College and the mortuary science program there. And so going into my senior year, I decided that's what I want to do. So when I graduated, I spent 1 year at the local, at that point it was Fort Steilacoom Community College, which is now Pierce College.
Right.
And after my first year there, then I went on down to Mount Hood and did my year down there. And finished up, because I had my general ed, I was able to finish that in 1 year down there. So that was back, I'm in my 36th year, so I guess you can do the math whatever year that was. A long time ago, before there were computers and cell phones. And so I guess I'm fulfilling my lifelong dream, so to speak, at this point. And I can't imagine having done anything else. I love what I do, and I love the profession, and I love the people, and employees and the families we serve. And like I said, I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
Well, and the nice thing about funeral service is it's afforded you the opportunity to travel kind of long reaches, which we'll get into that a little bit here in a few minutes, but also to do some things that you would not have been able to do. For example, you are a past president of the state association and have been a part of the state association for quite some time.
Yeah, I served on the board back, it was 97 to 2005, and served as president from 2003 to 2004. So
Yeah.
had a nice little run there on the state board. And we actually were having one of our board meetings when this holy earthquake hit. It's kind of an interesting little story. We were at the Lakewood office where it used to be and had the big boardroom table. And Jim Knoll was the executive director at that point. We were sitting at the table, and it took us all a second to realize what was going on, and before you knew it, we're all underneath the table.
That's great.
That's one of those moments, where were you when? And that's where we were. We were having a board meeting at the Lakewood office.
Yeah, yeah. I remember that. That was quite some time back. I was a little bit younger. I've only been in it 30 years, but I still remember that taking place back then, and hearing stories about it from some of the folks that were at the actual meeting too.
Yeah,
So,
it was a memorable one.
We kind of alluded there a little bit about being able to that funeral service has taken you in long reaches. Let's talk a little bit about that. Twice now, you've gone back to the African continent to set up mortuaries there and to help the folks there throughout I almost said country, but it's not a country, it's a continent. But helping them get mortuaries set up. Tell us about that, because that's really fascinating. I know it's been a little bit of time that's passed, but tell us how you got involved with this process and kind of what you did. Share
Sure.
with that a little bit.
Sure. So actually, it was in Kenya, which of course is a country in the continent of Kenya. And my old neighbor approached me back in December of 2001 it was, and he was a retired engineer with McKinstry Company, and he and his wife had done a lot of volunteer work with a nonprofit group out of Seattle called Med 25. Mm-hmm. They focused on providing medical assistance to people throughout Africa, and they had built a small medical clinic in a small little town called Mbita, Kenya, out on the shores of Lake Victoria of Western Kenya. Yeah. And so they had built this little medical clinic to give service to the people out there, pretty much for the mothers of small children and the children themselves. The HIV rate out in that area is about 28%. Wow. And all of Kenya is about 7%. And so you can imagine 28% out in this little community is just it was devastating for this community. Yeah. So once they built a small medical clinic, they asked the community, what else can we build for you? What else do you need? And without any hesitation, they said, we need a mortuary. That the closest one is about 25 miles away over impassable roads, most of the time dirt roads. If it was rainy at all, if they're just muddy, impassable. And so we really need a mortuary. And so that's how I got involved. Terry, being my former neighbor, knew what I did for a living, of course. And he came down and we had a discussion one evening, and he talked about the needs over there and I have to build a mortuary. And I told him, I said, well, Terry, I said, I don't know anything about funeral service in Kenya. And he says, that's why you need to come with us over there. I thought, oh boy. To me, I've been to Mexico and, the traditional tourist spots, but I'm not a big world traveler by any stretch of the imagination. So he told me about what they needed to do and how it all worked. And I said, well, I'll think about it. And so when he left my office that night, he says, now, whatever you do, don't look at the Secretary of State website for travel warnings. And I said, okay. So of course, what does he do? Once he walks out the door, what do? I pull it up. And I pull up Kenya, and I said, are you nuts? So I call him. I said, Terry, I said, you're a pretty conservative, safe guy. I said, but man, if I read these travel warnings, I said, you've been over there 3 or 4 times already. I said, what's that all about? He says, don't worry about it. Trust me, you're safe. I said, okay. So I agreed to go over. So about 6 weeks later, We flew over, 20-hour flight. We got into Nairobi in the evening, stayed the night there in Nairobi. The next morning, we caught an hour flight out to the small town of Kisumu, which is out closer to the shores of Lake Victoria. I guess it is on the Lake Victoria. It's just in a different region of it than where we eventually ended up.
Yeah.
We called Kisumu our home for 2 weeks, and we, along with a local driver for us and a gentleman that kind of knew the area that was involved in the project, for 2 weeks we drove around Western Kenya, visiting these little communities, visiting mortuaries, and found out how things operated and just the daily operations of what they did. And I tell you that it was enlightening. I mean, the first place we went to, the mortuaries in a couple different little buildings, and that's a loosely used term, trust me. And they reminded me of chicken coops. It just the way they were constructed and the way they were maintained, and it was really eye-opening. So that was the first time that's the first facility we saw. Fortunately, we saw some that were better, and we saw a few that were worse. And so there's a broad range there of mortuaries and how they're operated. Most of them are affiliated with local community hospitals.
Okay.
They're not privately owned. They're government run, associated with the hospitals. And some are, as I said, maintained better than others. But it was enlightening. So like I said, the first time we spent 2 weeks out running around Western Kenya, seeing the sights, trust me, really, really interesting. I've got some amazing pictures. And of course, you've seen the presentation.
Right.
And so that was the first trip, finding out what we needed to do and what we wanted to do as far as our facility. So once that trip was over with Terry and his construction group, they got together, and Terry and his wife actually spent just over 2 years over in Mbita constructing the mortuary. And I wasn't really involved other than just as a consultant of the layout and such. I wasn't physically involved in the construction. Then once it was built, I went back over in 2014, and that's when we opened up the mortuary and got it up and going. Now the first time I went over in 2012, I didn't see one embalming machine. They used gravity with 40% formalin hanging from the ceiling. And so that's how they embalmed. And so we ended up getting them. I see your Dutronic there over your shoulder there.
Yeah.
We ended up getting them one of those, and we shipped it over there. And it was there for about a month before I got there. When I got there, it was still in the box. They did not even open it because they had no idea what to do with it.
Really?
So wow. It was exciting to go over there to work with the 2 embalmers that they had on staff and to get them going. And they knew how to embalm, it was the gravity, and they still used, they injected, but they didn't drain.
Okay.
And so they didn't do any drainage. And so I'd say, see that little thing right there next to that artery you're using? They said, yeah. So if you cut that thing in half, or, almost, you're going to see different results here. Yeah. And so I had to explain to them what that was all about, and that really enlightened them as far as, that. So it was fun. It was really interesting and enjoyable to be able to go over there and to work with them to get that mortuary up and going. And the great thing about it is the way it operates over there, because of the nonprofit group we were working with, the economy over there, the average salary is $1,400 a year. And so it's a very, people they don't earn any money. Right. But they put great emphasis on funerals. The community comes together to donate money when someone passes away to help the family that has lost a loved one. So what they have done since I've been over there, and actually I guess they're in the process of doing it when I was there, but they've also built a larger medical clinic just below the hill where the mortuary currently sits. And they've been able to take the mortuary, serving close to 1,500 families a year now.
Goodness.
By having that mortuary that's profitable, they're able to take that profit and roll it into the new medical clinic, and a larger one now. And this provides free medical care for everyone that goes into the medical clinic. And once again, it hasn't changed. Usually it's young mothers and children that need most of the medical care. And so by this mortuary operating, it's able to subsidize the medical clinic And so they're able to provide this free medical care. And actually, the medical clinic, it's almost like a little hospital. It has 7 what they call wards, where they have 7 of them where people can actually stay overnight or numerous nights if they need to. And so it's just a great setup over there. Everybody benefits from it. The people are so appreciative. You know, you're over there, and obviously, you know, the people from America, we stand out a little bit. They call us Mazungas. You drive down the road and they'd yell at you, Mazunga, Mazunga. And you're the only Caucasian person in the area, but you know what? They know what you're there for.
Yeah.
And they're so appreciative, thanking you and giving you their 1,000-watt smiles. And it's just a very rewarding trip to be able to go over. It's always good to get on that big old 747 to leave Nairobi to come home. But you know what? Once you get home, you get the itch to go back over.
Sure.
And we were talking about that earlier, and I do have that itch just to go back over. One of the embalmers is still there. I still communicate with him via Facebook, and he's doing a great job over there, taking care of the bodies. Over there, in the funeral service over there is a little bit different, where when a death occurs, the family will bring the deceased to the funeral home or to the mortuary. And then the embalmer will go ahead and embalm the body. They will dress the body and place the person in the casket. And then a day or two later, the family will pick up the casket, take it back to their family home. They'll have a 2 or 3 day funeral, and then they'll bury the casket on the family property. And so it's a little bit different. So essentially all they're doing is just embalming, dressing, and casketing, and that's their only involvement. Another thing that's interesting about this area is all these other communities that we visited. We visited 14 different mortuaries while I was over there the first time. And every one of them, outside of the mortuary on the corner, there was a casket maker. And they are caskets, they're not coffins, they're caskets.
Yeah,
and there's a casket maker. And so the family would go out on the corner and purchase the casket from the casket maker, and then he would deliver it to the mortuary, just literally feet away. But in the small community, there was nobody that wanted to step up to make the caskets. We wanted to give anybody the opportunity to do so, to make a living, but nobody wanted to do it.
Yeah.
So we thought, well, if no one's going to do it, we'll sell the casket. And so there's a hardware store in Kisumu, the first place we went to. Now, to kind of give you an idea, Kisumu is a 2.5-hour drive and an hour, they call it a ferry boat, but it's more of a barge, and an hour ride on this barge out to where we are in Mbita. And so this hardware store in Kisumu, they will deliver once a week. They'll deliver caskets once a week, whatever the order is. Yeah. And so there are wholesalers, what they are. They'll bring caskets out. The mortuary will sell the casket. So it gives them that extra revenue. They sell clothing. And so they're getting closer to being that full service operation that that we are over here in the States. So it's really interesting and rewarding to be able to see how that has come along and to help the people in that community. It's really really a neat thing.
Well, I tell you, I love having you on here because a lot of the questions that, as you were talking, that I was thinking of, well, what about this? What about this? And you just kind of answered them for me without having to ask. So thank you for that. But I do have a couple questions.
Sure.
You talked about the HIV rate. That was back 6 years, I guess, or so, 7 years ago. Have they seen any decrease in that you're aware of in that village, in that area?
To be honest, I have not followed up on that. As I got my notes together, for our discussion today, I was reviewing them and I saw that. I really didn't have time to go back and look, but I want to do that and see it. It was decreasing. It was, I have my notes here, it was at 33%. And when I was there, it was at 28. So at least it was trending in the right direction.
Right, yeah.
And
so I know that, to see where they're at now. Yeah,
and I know that they're getting hit a little bit with COVID out there as well.
Are they?
Yeah, and so I don't know what the numbers are, but in communicating with the friend of mine on Facebook, he said, yeah, they are seeing it. And, these poor embalmers over there, we took over all the PPEs we could. I could take over in a suitcase, and they had nothing. I took over masks and gloves and gowns, and they would reuse, a disposable gown that we would throw away. They'd reuse it for a month, just keep cleaning it. And it's just, and think of the exposure that they have on a daily basis to, not only to the HIV, but now that the COVID, it's just, I think about them all the time and what they're exposed to. It's a scary thing.
Now, you were saying, I'll point out, it reminds me, one of our friends that's actually been on here, Dominic Astorino, just came back from Africa, doing something very similar, teaching embalming practices and things. And he was saying the exact same thing of the PPEs are just non-existent. They just don't have PPEs there. So yeah, I mean, anything that we can do to help, we'd be happy to help with in that aspect as a state association. If that's what the need is, we'd be happy to help. Going forward, is there plans to go back to Kenya to check in, to update, to see how they're doing with things?
It is on my bucket list. I don't have immediate plans just because everything that's going on, but I would like to get back there. It's a beautiful part of the world out here on the shores of Lake Victoria. It's very reminiscent of Hawaii, green, luscious rolling hills, palm trees, very nice temperatures as far as the weather's concerned. It's
Right.
a gorgeous area. I love the people. I certainly would like to get back and see the people that are working not only at the mortuary, but the people that I knew that were working at the medical clinic as well.
Yeah.
Very hardworking people, and they scratch for every penny that they can get, and they're appreciative many times over. So I'd love to get back there when things settle down a bit and just to go visit. Plus, I wouldn't mind going to visit Zanzibar, which is the island right off of Kenya. So that's a gorgeous area there on the Indian Ocean.
Yeah.
So I'm a tropics type of guy, and so I would love to get over there and visit Zanzibar as well and experience that beautiful area. It's just a short flight the other way from Nairobi.
Sure. Now, the mortuary, I know you mentioned it before that a lot of them are owned by the hospitals or by the state. How is this one operated? Is it owned by the hospital as well?
No, it's totally independent. It's owned by the people of the community there.
I see. Okay.
And so they do have someone, and tell you the truth, I'm not sure how it's set up. It still might, now that I think about it, it's run by the community. I mean, they don't have a bunch of people there or anybody from the United States over there running it. It is all run by the local people. But I think that the nonprofit, the Med 25, still oversees the operation of it.
Sure.
As far as the running of it, to make sure all the finances are in proper order and everything's being carried out that way.
It amazes me when you were talking about families, the 25 miles away, bringing, or more, bringing their loved ones to the mortuary. I can't imagine, based off your description of some of those impassable roads and various things like that, I can't imagine that's an easy process to deliver the remains to the mortuary, to come back a couple days later and then transport back. I'm imagining that's probably pretty difficult for them. Is that accurate?
It is. A lot of times they just have to borrow whoever has a little pickup truck, and that's I mean, that's what it is. And they wrap the person up in blankets or whatever they have, and they place him in the back of the open bed pickup truck. There's no canopy, there's no tailgate usually, and they just pull into the mortuary and they drop off. Yeah. And so I think of one time that happened at one of the places. They knew the family was coming in, and they told me the circumstances of the lady that died. And it was a young lady, and in Kenya they practice polygamy.
Okay.
And so it was a young lady that her husband wanted to take on another wife, and she just was so distraught over that she ended up committing suicide. She had lit herself on fire and died.
Wow. And
so that's who they're bringing in for them to prepare, for the funeral service. So just very, very traumatic and very rough life over there as far as day-to-day occurrences and such.
Sounds like it. Wow. Well, interesting. Very interesting to hear. And again, we want to help if there's any way that we can.
Okay.
If your nonprofit there reaches out, we'll do what we can to assist with that.
That'd be great.
Certainly love to be a part of anything to do with that. But Brian, thank you. It's been very fun to hear these stories. I remember I was just a couple of years ago when you were sharing them with me before at one of our district meetings. I shouldn't say sharing them with me, sharing them with our district. It was fascinating to hear these stories because too often we get into our little bubble of this is what funeral service is. This is what it is throughout the world, what we're doing right here in our own little town. And the reality is what we're doing in our own little town is totally different than the rest of the world.
It really is, but yet it's still the same too. Like I said, I think back to those embalmers, and they have the same demeanor that we do as far as caring for families and the desire to do that. Now, I will add too, it's a little bit different. They don't have funeral directors per se. They have a person in the office that takes care of basically the money, because they don't have to fill out all the paperwork that we fill out for permits and death certificates. It's more of a financial transaction.
Yeah.
And then that's all it is. And so they that person in the office, usually it's just a clerk that takes care of the financial part, and the two embalmers are in the back room doing what they need to do and working with the family, and with clothing and such. And so it's really
sounds very industrial.
Yes,
very industrial.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that probably there's not a requirement for burial vaults because we're burying on their own property, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. You can tell me that, but are they putting any kind of marker, headstone, memorial out where the person was buried, or is it just the burial and the family knows where that took place, but that's the only indication that they're there?
I haven't seen, they don't use any type of outer burial container. I mean, they put the casket right into the dirt, right into the ground.
Kind of
and
thought
so I have not been out to anybody's home to see any memorialization.
Mm-hmm.
But I have not seen any memorialization over there, whether it's provided, from the mortuary or any private company. Actually, you know what? I take it back. I did see one in Nairobi along the side of the road. Mm-hmm. The gentleman fixed lawnmowers and he sold memorial markers. But I did not see anything out where we were out and keep in mind that's in Nairobi, the major city. But I did not see anything out in the areas that we were, any type of memorialization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lawn mowers and memorials, huh?
That's right. Yeah, he had his little stand set up, but that's what he was doing. And you say that it's interesting because as we were driving, this one day, the first time over there when we were visiting all little communities, we went up the morning of one of the days that we started out. We went up this big mountain as a big, just dirt road, ruts. You're just bouncing back and forth, and it just, oh my gosh! If you're motion sickness, you never would have made it. And we got up to the top of this hill, and there's a lady making basically it's like a tortilla off to the side of the road. She had a little fire, and she made her little tortillas probably either that morning or the night before, and then she was warming up over a little fire, literally a fire. It wasn't a burner, it was a fire. And then she had some little jams or jellies that you could pick that you wanted on it. Oh my gosh, it was so good. But right next to her, though, there was a gentleman that had a little shop, and he sold tents, or he rented tents, chairs, and generators, and he sold caskets. It wasn't a mortuary, but he offered those things that people needed for funeral services, and you can rent them from him.
Yeah.
I thought, well, there's a little bit of an entrepreneur spirit out in the middle of nowhere, up on this mountainside. And
absolutely.
So it was kind of interesting that he rented generators, chairs, and tents, and he sold caskets. So I got some good pictures of that. It was a pretty neat little experience to see that.
Well, certainly the need for funeral, the need for death care has been around since the beginning of time. But even in areas where you're talking about, what a great idea to think, entrepreneurial for sure. Go out and rent a tent, rent some chairs. Here's the casket. You're good to go.
Yeah.
That's great.
So yeah, it was a pretty neat little thing to see there.
But it's interesting to me to hear from people from all over the world and how ingenious they are of doing that. And yet we think sometimes in our own little bubbles here, oh my gosh, I don't know if I should offer something like that because how's it going to go over? To me, it sounds like do it, check it out, offer it. If you think it's something that your families would want, the community would want, or there's a need there, do it. Yeah. You might be that guy that's just renting the chairs and tent and selling caskets on the side. You might be the only person within 50 miles doing it. So go for it.
Yeah. That's right.
Roll the dice and see what happens. So, well, that's great, Brian. I want to thank you for coming on. Like I say, I love hearing about this. I love hearing about funeral service all across the world. how things operate. And I always learn something new from it. So thank you for sharing that with us and coming on. If we want to hear more, how can we get in touch with you? Do you got an email you can share with me?
Yeah, send it to brian.curnow@curnowfuneralhome.com.
Okay.
I can send out I've got the presentation on a PowerPoint program, so I can do that. And I have my elementary school presentation that I gave at my son's elementary school. He's in the 4th grade. That's a little bit watered down, as you can imagine. Then I have my funeral home version that nothing held back there. So you let me know which one you want.
Yeah. Select your audience, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's great. Well, again, Brian Curnow, Curnow Funeral Home, thanks for coming on board. Thanks for being a part of the association. Thank you for being one of our past presidents and for your commitment with the association for all these years. And thank you for going to Africa twice. Thank you.
Twice.
And for teaching and just sharing your knowledge and your experience with people to further create the value that's out there for funeral service. It's appreciated way more than you know. So
Thanks,
I'm
Rob.
glad you did that, and love to hear if you go back again. And again, if we can help you with anything, let us know. In the meantime,
there too, if anybody wants to go with me over to work at a little mortuary for a week or 10 days, I'll take anybody that wants to go as well.
Yeah, it sounds like a great plan, but I heard you got to get a lot of shots before you go.
You do get some shots, that's for sure.
I hear that's kind of a fun time going through that series.
Yeah. So, but something you just had to do.
Yeah. Well, I think it would be a blast to actually go with you. I really do. So if you go again, let me know, and I'll see if I can.
I'll get the word out. I'll do that.
Well, Brian, again, thanks for coming on. As always, thank you for watching Member Talk. We're glad that you joined us. If you have any comments or concerns, if you want to hear from anybody, let us know. If you'd like to be a part of Member Talk, give me a call anytime. We'd love to get you on here and have you join the conversation. As always, subscribe, like us, follow us, all those things that you do on social media. And until next time, thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.